The morning sun had barely broken through the haze that hung over Manila, yet the streets were already alive with their usual chorus. Jeepneys honking, roosters crowing from unseen alleys, and vendors calling out their goods in rhythmic, familiar chants. The city pulsed with life, stubborn and unyielding, like it always did. But in one narrow corner near Quiapo, between the scent of fried bananas and the murmur of 1,000 footsteps, stood a small boy with an old guitar slung across his shoulder. His name was Miguel Santiago, 13 years old, though his eyes carried a quiet maturity that didn't belong to a child. His clothes were worn thin, his slippers mismatched, and his hair stuck out in places the comb never quite reached. Still, there was something about him, an invisible dignity, the kind that poverty couldn't wash away. He stood beside an empty crate that served as his makeshift stage. Every morning, he placed it in the same spot beneath the cracked sign of a sari-sari store, where people passed on their way to work. Miguel's guitar, chipped, faded, and missing a string, had once belonged to his late father, a carpenter who used to hum Elvis Presley songs while sanding wood. The guitar was all he had left of him. Miguel adjusted the strap carefully, took a deep breath, and began to strum. At first, people didn't pay attention. They rarely did. Life in Manila moved fast and few stopped for anything that didn't demand their attention. But then Miguel began to sing. Wise men say only fools rush in. The sound was soft yet powerful, a voice far beyond his years, rich, warm, and soaked with emotion. It cut through the noise of the street like sunlight through fog. Heads began to turn. A tricycle driver slowed down. A street vendor paused mid-sale. A few steps away, a mother with her child stopped walking just to listen. There was something haunting about Miguel's voice. It carried not just melody, but memory. The echo of late nights when he'd sing to his mother to help her forget the pain. Because at home, things weren't easy. Their house, if it could be called that, was a tiny room made of plywood and tin sheets on the edge of the railroad tracks. His mother, Rosa, had fallen ill months ago with a sickness they couldn't afford to name. Her cough was constant now, her body frail. She used to work as a laundry woman, but lately, Miguel had become the provider. Each peso he earned on the street went into a small tin can beside her bed. Some days it barely covered rice. On better days there was enough for her medicine. As he sang the chorus, Miguel closed his eyes, picturing her face. He could almost hear her whispering from home, "Sing it again, Hijo. Your voice heals me. But I can't help falling in love with you." When he opened his eyes, a few people had gathered around him, strangers smiling softly, others filming on their phones. He didn't notice the tourist among them, a middle-aged woman with a kind face and watery eyes. She held up her phone and recorded quietly, whispering, "Oh my God, listen to this boy." Miguel's small hand trembled slightly as he played, but his voice never wavered. He didn't just sing Elvis, he became him. Every note was filled with longing, not for fame or fortune, but for love, love for his mother, for the father he missed, for the small flicker of hope that tomorrow might be better. When the last chord faded, there was silence for a heartbeat. Then, applause, real, warm applause that made his cheeks flush with disbelief. Someone dropped a 100-peso bill into his small plastic cup. Another person patted his shoulder and said, "Ang galing mo, anak. You're amazing, son." Miguel smiled shyly and bowed his head. "Salamat po," he whispered. As the crowd began to disperse, the tourist approached him. "That was beautiful," she said in accented English. "What's your name?" "Miguel, ma'am," he replied softly. She smiled and pointed at the old guitar. "Your father must be proud." Miguel's eyes softened. "He's in heaven, Mom, but I still play his songs." Something in the woman's heart stirred. She nodded gently, then said, "Keep singing, Miguel. The world needs voices like yours." She pressed a few bills into his hand, more than he'd ever received in one day, and walked away. Miguel looked at the money, then toward the direction of home. He couldn't wait to show his mother. By late afternoon, the streets grew heavier with heat. Miguel finished his songs and started the walk back home, weaving through alleyways until the concrete turned to dirt. The hum of the city faded, replaced by the faint clatter of trains in the distance. When he reached their little shack, his mother was waiting by the door, her thin frame leaning on a chair. He grinned. "Mama, I earned enough for your medicine today." Her tired face lit up, her eyes glimmering with love. "My Miguel, my little Elvis." He laughed and placed the money on the table. "Someone recorded me, Mama. She said the world needs my voice." His mother coughed but smiled through it. "The world does, anak. But remember, the best songs are the ones that come from the heart. Promise me you'll always sing with love." "I promise, Mama." That night, as the city outside dimmed into a sea of lights, the same song, soft and slow. The walls seemed to disappear, and for a few moments, their small home felt like a concert hall. Rosa closed her eyes, listening as if the melody itself could mend her body. Unbeknownst to them, the video of that morning's performance had already begun spreading online, millions of people watching, sharing, crying. The boy with the broken guitar, the Filipino Elvis, had touched hearts across the world, but Miguel didn't know that yet. He only knew one thing. That as long as his mother was alive to hear him sing, he would keep playing, keep dreaming, and keep believing that love, even in the poorest corners of the world, could make miracles happen. And far away, in a quiet corner of Los Angeles, a certain producer's assistant scrolled past the video, paused and whispered, "Simon, you need to see this." 2 weeks had passed since the day Miguel sang on the streets of Quiapo. The day a kind tourist stopped to film a barefoot boy with an old guitar. He had long forgotten about her by now. To him, it had been just another morning of singing for coins, another day of trying to keep his mother's medicine box from running empty. But fate, it seemed, was quietly working behind the scenes. On that humid afternoon the air inside their small home felt thick and still. The faint hum of the nearby train rattled the tin roof, while Miguel sat cross-legged beside his mother, strumming gently. He was singing softly, not for the crowd this time but for her. The old guitar, missing a string, still carried the same comforting tone that filled their evenings with warmth. Rosa, propped up by a stack of thin pillows, watched her son with a tired smile. "You sing better every day, Anak," she said, her voice thin but loving. Miguel blushed. "It's because I'm practicing hard, Mama. One day I'll sing on TV, like the singers you watch on those talent shows." She chuckled softly, shaking her head. "You already sing from the heart. That's better than TV." A knock suddenly echoed on the wooden door. Startled, Miguel stopped playing. He rushed to open it and found their neighbor, Aling Sheehan, standing outside, holding her old phone in one hand and a wide grin on her face. "Miguel," she exclaimed, waving the phone excitedly. "Nakikita ka sa internet! You're on the internet!" He blinked, confused. She turned the screen toward him. On it played a video, his video. There he was, standing barefoot in the street, singing "Can't Help Falling in Love." The sound was tinny, but unmistakable. Underneath the video, a title read, "Filipino Street Boy Sings Elvis and Brings Everyone to Tears." And below it, thousands of comments. "Oh my God, this kid's voice is pure soul. I'm crying. Someone help this boy. Where is he from? He deserves the world." Rosa gasped. That's you, Miguel." He could only stare. His name was suddenly everywhere, on Facebook, YouTube, even TikTok. The view count ticked upward faster than he could read it. 10,050 101 million. His hands began to tremble. "Mama, the world's watching me." For the next few days, people began showing up near their street corner. Strangers carrying cameras, bloggers asking for interviews, and even a few reporters. Miguel had never seen so many people smile at him before. The same place that used to ignore his songs now buzzed with excitement whenever he sang. But amid all the attention, one message stood out. It came in the form of an email, sent to an address belonging to a local reporter who had helped translate it for him. The subject line read, "NVDO America's Got Talent, Los Angeles, USA." Miguel's heart stopped for a moment as the words sank in. He read the message again and again, as though his eyes were playing tricks. The letter explained how the AGT producers had seen his viral video and wanted to invite him to audition. All expenses paid. Simon Cowell himself was deeply moved, it said. "We believe Miguel's story and voice deserve a global stage." His mother's frail hands trembled as she held the printed letter. "America's Got Talent," she whispered, her voice quivering. "Miguel, that's where stars are born." He nodded slowly, eyes wide. "Mama, they want me to sing there." Then came the silence, the heavy kind, filled with both awe and fear. Rosa looked around their small home, the uneven walls, the flickering bulb, the worn-out floor. "But, Anak," she said softly, "how will we go there? We don't even have passports. Or money." The dream that had burned so brightly just moments ago began to dim. Miguel looked down at his guitar, tracing his father's old initials carved into the wood. "Maybe it's too big for us, Mama," he whispered. "Maybe dreams like this are for rich people." But Rosa reached out and lifted his chin gently. Her eyes, though tired, burned with determination. "No, Hijo. Dreams are for those who believe, and I believe in you." Word spread fast across their neighborhood. By the next morning, news of the invitation had reached everyone, from the jeepney drivers to the fruit vendors. And then, something beautiful began to happen. One by one, people came forward with small offerings. A tricycle driver handed over a few bills for Miguel's fare to the embassy. A bakery owner donated bread for their meals. Children ran door to door collecting coins in jars labeled, "For Miguel's American Dream." Even the church nearby announced after Sunday Mass, "We are raising funds to send a young boy from our community to represent us all in America." The spirit of Bayanihan, the Filipino heart of communal unity, came alive. What had begun as one boy's song turned into a movement of kindness. People who barely had enough for themselves gave what they could. It wasn't charity, it was love. At night, Miguel and his mother would sit by the window, listening to the laughter outside, humbled and overwhelmed. "They believe in you, Anak," Rosa whispered one evening, tears streaming down her face. "They believe because your song gave them hope." Miguel took her hand. "Then I'll make them proud, Mama. I'll sing not just for us, but for everyone who helped me." Weeks later, Miguel stood at Ninoy Aquino International Airport, wearing a donated button-up shirt that was slightly too big and holding his guitar case close to his chest. Around him, the same neighbors who had once watched him sing on the street now gathered to say goodbye. Aling Shaun wiped her eyes. Go and show the world, Miguel, what a Filipino heart sounds like. The tricycle drivers honked their horns in farewell, a chorus of pride and love echoing through the morning air. Before boarding, Miguel turned to his mother. She looked frail, her illness still shadowing her, but she smiled bravely. Sing with love, she said. That's what will reach them. He nodded, holding back tears. I'll sing for you, Mama. As the plane lifted into the clouds, Miguel pressed his forehead to the window, watching Manila shrink beneath him. The city that had given him everything, even when it had nothing to give. Somewhere in the sky, he whispered to himself, Papa, Mama, this is for you. He didn't know what waited in America, fame, failure, or something in between. But he knew one thing for sure. The voice that had started on the streets of Manila was now on its way to touch the world. The lights of Los Angeles shimmered like a sea of stars below as the plane descended, but for 13-year-old Miguel Santiago, it felt as though he was still dreaming. Just days ago he'd been singing barefoot on the cracked sidewalks of Manila. Now, he was thousands of miles from home, clutching his father's old guitar, his only treasure, as he prepared to walk onto one of the biggest stages in the world, America's Got Talent. His hands were clammy, his heart racing. Yet, in the midst of the noise and chaos backstage, the sound of performers rehearsing, crew members rushing around, and the distant hum of the crowd, Miguel felt a strange calmness whenever he touched his guitar. It was as if his father's spirit lingered in its strings. All right, kid. A stage assistant said kindly, placing a small microphone on his shirt. You ready? Miguel nodded nervously. Yes, sir. The man smiled. Good. Just remember, it's not about impressing anyone. Just sing your heart out. Sing his heart out. That's what his mother had told him too. He glanced up at the monitor showing the live stage, the AGT logo gleaming bright. The four judges sitting behind their desk: Sofia Vergara, Heidi Klum, Howie Mandel, and the one everyone feared most, Simon Cowell. Miguel swallowed hard. He'd seen clips of Simon online, the man who could shatter dreams with a single eyebrow raise. But he also remembered his mother's words before he left. Don't sing to win, Hijo. Sing to make them feel. The stagehand signaled him forward. Go ahead, Miguel. You're up. The heavy curtains parted, and the world seemed to explode in light. Thousands of eyes turned toward him. The theater was enormous, towering balconies, glowing spotlights, cameras hovering like watchful eagles. Miguel took a tiny step forward, clutching his guitar as if it were a lifeline. A hush fell over the audience as he stood center stage, a small boy dwarfed by the grandeur of it all. Simon leaned forward slightly, curiosity flickering across his face. Hello there, he said in his crisp British accent. What's your name? Miguel, sir. Miguel Santiago. I'm from the Philippines. Ah, Simon nodded. And how old are you? Miguel, 13, sir. Sophia smiled warmly. 13. Oh, you're so cute! What are you going to do for us today? Miguel adjusted his grip on the guitar. I'm going to sing my mother's favorite song, Can't Help Falling in Love, by Elvis Presley. The audience reacted softly, some murmuring, others nodding with recognition. Elvis, a classic. A bold choice for such a young boy. Simon raised an eyebrow. Elvis, huh, that's a big song. Why this one? Miguel hesitated, then spoke quietly, his voice trembling but sincere. Because my mama is sick, and when I sing this song for her she smiles again. There was a collective awe from the audience, even Heidi's eyes softened. Simon's expression shifted, still stern, but with a faint glimmer of something gentler. All right, Miguel, he said softly. Whenever you're ready. Miguel took a deep breath. His fingers brushed against the strings, and for a moment, all the noise around him faded. The lights, the cameras, the pressure. There was only his heart, his song, and the memory of his mother's voice whispering, sing with love. He began to play. Wise men say, only fools rush in. The first note floated through the air, fragile yet golden. The audience grew utterly still. His voice wasn't powerful in the usual sense. It was pure, raw, and heartbreakingly honest. It carried the warmth of his mother's lullabies, the ache of poverty, the hope of a boy who had seen too much and yet still believed in beauty. Simon's eyes flickered. He leaned back slowly, arms uncrossing, his usual mask of skepticism slipping away. But I can't help falling in love with you. Miguel's tone deepened with emotion, trembling slightly on the edges. Every word seemed to come from his soul, his accent wrapping around the lyrics like poetry. He wasn't performing, he was feeling. A camera zoomed in on his small hands, calloused from street playing, now dancing gracefully over the strings. By the second verse, people in the audience were wiping their eyes. A mother in the front row clutched her chest. Sophia whispered, "Oh my God, he's so sincere." And then came the bridge. Miguel's voice soared, trembling with love and longing. Take my hand, take my whole life too. It was as if every hardship, every sleepless night beside his mother's bedside, Every peso earned from strangers had built up to this one moment when he reached the final line. For I can't help falling in love with you. The silence that followed was sacred. For a few heartbeats, the entire auditorium held its breath. Then, like thunder, the applause erupted. The audience stood to their feet, roaring with cheers. Miguel blinked in shock, his hands trembling on the guitar. Sophia stood up first, clapping through tears. That was so beautiful. You sing with your soul, Miguel. You made me cry. Howie grinned. That's one of the most heartfelt performances we've ever had. You're what this show is all about, real talent, real heart. Heidi nodded enthusiastically. You took a song we all know and made it your own. That's what great artists do. And then came Simon. He sat quietly for a long moment, his eyes glistening under the stage lights. The audience hushed, waiting for his verdict. Finally, he spoke, softly, almost as if he were talking to himself. You know, Miguel, he said, my mother used to sing that song to me when I was a boy. A soft gasp rippled through the crowd. Simon's voice cracked slightly as he continued. It's been many years since I've heard it sung with that much love. You didn't just sing, you made us feel. And that's something you can't teach. Miguel blinked, his throat tightening. Thank you, sir, he whispered. Simon took a deep breath, then looked down at the golden buzzer in front of him. His finger hovered over it as the audience began to cheer louder, sensing what might happen. He said with a rare smile, this young man reminds us what music is really about. Love, hope and heart. Then, with one decisive motion, boom! Simon slammed the golden buzzer. Gold confetti exploded from above, raining down in waves of light. Miguel gasped, covering his mouth as tears streamed down his cheeks. The crowd went wild. The judges stood. Even Simon, usually stoic, stood up and applauded through misty eyes. Miguel dropped to his knees, overcome with emotion. In that moment he wasn't the poor boy from Manila anymore. He was a star. But more than that, he was a son who had kept his promise. Somewhere across the ocean, in a small tin-roofed home, Rosa watched the performance through a crackling livestream on her neighbor's phone. When she saw Simon press the golden buzzer, she pressed her hand to her heart and whispered through tears, "That's my son. My Miguel." As the last of the golden confetti fluttered to the stage floor, Miguel looked up at the ceiling, whispered, "This is for you, Mama," and smiled through the shimmer of light. A boy who had sung not for fame, but for love. The stage was still glittering with golden confetti. The lights danced across it like tiny stars, reflecting off Miguel's tear-streaked cheeks. He stood frozen, guitar clutched in his trembling hands, his heart pounding so hard he thought the whole auditorium could hear it. The cheers were deafening, a storm of applause and emotion, but for a few seconds, he couldn't hear any of it. All he could hear was the echo of his mother's voice in his heart, "Sing with love, Anak. That's what will reach them." And it had. The same song he once sang in the narrow streets of Quiapo had now filled an arena of thousands, and touched the heart of one of the world's toughest judges. The stage assistant rushed up to him, smiling. "You did it, Miguel, you did it." He nodded shakily, barely believing any of it was real. His eyes lifted toward the judges' table, where Simon Cowell was standing, not just standing, but clapping. It was the kind of slow, reverent applause that meant something deeper than words. Simon wiped his eyes quickly, trying to hide it, but the cameras had already caught him. The audience gasped. Simon Cowell, the man who rarely showed emotion, was crying. He leaned toward his microphone, his voice thick with feeling. "Miguel, I've been doing this show for a long time. I've heard thousands of singers, but what you did today, that wasn't just singing, that was pure heart." The audience roared again. Miguel tried to smile but his lips quivered. Simon continued, his voice soft but trembling. "You know, my mother loved that song. She used to sing it to me before bed when I was little. And when you sang it today, for a moment it felt like she was here again." The entire room went quiet. Even the other judges looked emotional. Sophia clasped her hands over her mouth, Heidi wiped her eyes, and Howie just nodded, whispering, "Wow." Simon took a deep breath and looked straight at Miguel. "That's the power of music, Miguel. It brings people back to what matters, love, family, and hope. You reminded me of that tonight." The audience erupted again, chanting his name. "Miguel! Miguel! Miguel!" He blinked rapidly, trying to hold back tears. "Thank you, sir, thank you everyone," he said, his voice shaking. I sang that song for my mama. She's sick back home, but I wanted her to smile again." Sophia was already crying openly. "Oh sweetheart," she said, "you made all of us smile. You made the whole world fall in love with your voice." Heidi leaned forward. "Your story, your heart, your voice. It's everything we need right now. You're a gift, Miguel." Howie added, "I think your mother's watching right now, and she's so proud. You made not just your mom proud, but your whole country." Miguel couldn't speak. The confetti kept falling, sticking to his hair and shoulders. Somewhere in the crowd, a fan waved a small Philippine flag and soon more followed. Within seconds the whole audience was chanting again, waving tiny flags that had appeared from nowhere. "Mabuhay Miguel, we love you." Simon smiled faintly at the sight. You see that, Miguel? That's love. You've brought people together from all over the world, not through fame, not through money, but through kindness. Through something real. He walked around the judges' table, surprising everyone, and stepped up onto the stage. The crowd gasped. It was rare for Simon Cowell to leave his seat. Miguel instinctively took a step back, unsure what to do. Simon approached, his usual sternness replaced by warmth. He placed a gentle hand on Miguel's shoulder. That guitar of yours, he said, looking at the old cracked wood. He'd seen a lot, hasn't it? Miguel nodded. It was my papa's. I learned to play on it after he passed away. Simon swallowed hard, visibly moved. Then it's not just a guitar. It's your history, your love, and your strength. Never lose it. He knelt slightly so he could look Miguel in the eyes. And never forget where you came from. Because that's what makes you great. You have a gift, Miguel. But more than that, you have a heart that the world needs. Miguel's tears finally spilled over. He couldn't find words, so he did the only thing he knew. He hugged Simon. The crowd exploded again. Cheers, whistles, applause so loud it shook the walls. Cameras flashed from every angle, capturing the moment. A small Filipino boy and the world's toughest judge, locked in a tearful embrace under a shower of gold. Backstage the energy was electric. Producers, staff and other contestants crowded around the monitor, still replaying the moment again and again. Simon cried. Someone whispered. That never happens. Miguel stood just behind the curtains, still dazed, still trembling. One of the stage crew handed him a towel to wipe the glitter from his face. You just made TV history, kid, the man said with a grin. He didn't know what that meant exactly. All he knew was that his dream had come true. Then, his handler handed him a phone. Someone very special wants to see you. The screen flickered, and suddenly, there was his mother's face. The image was blurry, the connection poor, but her smile shone brighter than any spotlight. Mama, Miguel gasped, his tears returning. Rosa's voice was soft, trembling with pride. I saw everything, Anak. I saw the confetti, and that man, Simon, he cried because of you. Miguel laughed through his tears. I sang for you, Mama. I told them it was your favorite song. Her hand covered her mouth, and for a moment, she couldn't speak. Then she whispered, you made the world hear your heart, my son. You've already won. The producers around him smiled, some quietly wiping their eyes. It was a scene that transcended television. The triumph of love over hardship, the beauty of a mother's pride. Miguel pressed his forehead against the screen, whispering, I'll come home soon, Mama, I promise. Later that night, the clip of Miguel's performance, and Simon's tears, flooded the internet. Within hours it became one of the most watched videos in AGT history. Headlines across the world read, Simon Cowell brought to tears by Filipino street singer. From poverty to golden buzzer, the boy who sang Elvis and touched the world. Celebrities reposted it. News anchors praised it. Fans flooded social media with messages of love and admiration. But Miguel didn't care about the fame. Sitting quietly in his small hotel room, still wearing his lucky shirt and clutching his guitar, he whispered a prayer of thanks. He thought of his father's hands teaching him his first chords. He thought of the streets that had been his first stage. And he thought of his mother, her tired eyes, her fragile smile, her unwavering faith in him. For the first time in a long while, Miguel felt something deep in his chest, peace. The world might now see him as the boy who made Simon Cowell cry, but to him, he was just Miguel from Manila, a son who sang for love, and that love had reached farther than he ever dreamed. Months had passed since that night, the night golden confetti rained like blessings, the night a barefoot boy from Manila made Simon Cowell cry. The world had seen his heart, but what they hadn't seen was what came after. The quiet acts of gratitude that spoke louder than applause ever could. Miguel stood backstage at the America's Got Talent finale, his small hands clutching the same battered guitar he'd carried through the streets of Manila. It had been polished now, its strings replaced, but the soul of it remained unchanged. His mother Lisa was there too, alive, healthy, radiant. Her cheeks glowed with the kind of joy that only comes after years of tears. Mama, Miguel said, looking at her with trembling eyes, I'm singing for you again. Well, she smiled, tears already glistening. You always do, Anak. Every time you sing, you bring me home. The host called his name. Please welcome Miguel Santos? The crowd erupted. Thousands of people stood clapping, shouting his name. Somewhere in that sea of faces were Simon, Heidi, Sophia and Howie. 4 people who had watched him grow from a shy street singer into a global inspiration. Miguel walked to the center of the stage, the lights bathing him in gold. For a moment, he closed his eyes and remembered the smell of fried bananas on the Manila street corners, the sound of jeepneys honking, the echo of his mother's coughing in their small apartment. He remembered the neighbors who had given him coins, rice and prayers. Every memory, every act of kindness became a note in the song he was about to sing. He strummed the guitar, the first soft, familiar chords of Can't Help Falling in Love. But this time, it sounded different. fuller, wiser, stronger. The audience fell silent. It wasn't just a performance anymore, it was a prayer, a thank you whispered in melody. Wise men say, only fools rush in. His voice carried through the hall like a gentle wind. The sound was still youthful, but now it held something deeper, the ache of loss, the joy of reunion, and the peace that comes from gratitude. Backstage, his mother covered her mouth as tears streamed down her cheeks. For the first time in years, she wasn't watching from a flickering TV, she was here, breathing the same air as her son, watching him live the dream they both prayed for under the same leaky roof back home. But I can't help falling in love with you. The camera zoomed in on Simon. His eyes were glistening again. He whispered something under his breath, he's got the soul of an angel. When the final note faded, the crowd rose like a wave, the applause thundered. Miguel looked up, smiled, and said softly into the mic, for my mother, for my country, and for everyone who believes love can change everything. Then he placed his guitar down, walked to the judge's table, and reached for Simon's hand. The gesture was simple, but the meaning was immense. From the boy who once sang for coins to the man who reminded the world of kindness, Simon squeezed his hand back and whispered, you didn't just win tonight, Miguel, you healed hearts. Months later, Manila. Miguel's plane landed in the Philippines to a scene he could barely believe. Crowds had gathered at the airport, waving flags and homemade signs.
We're proud of you, Miguel.
And from Tondo to the world, he carried a small trophy in one hand, not the grand prize, but something more precious, a plaque from Simon Cowell himself that read, for reminding the world what love sounds like. When he walked out, the first person to embrace him was his mother. The second was his old neighbor, Aling Rosa, who had once given him leftover rice when he went hungry. Soon everyone from his street came running, vendors, tricycle drivers, schoolchildren. Miguel smiled through tears. You all sent me there, he said. Now I'm home, and it's time to give back. Within weeks, Miguel began a small project that would become his life's purpose. He gathered local children, many of them barefoot, just like he once was, and started teaching them how to sing and play instruments. They met under a mango tree near their neighborhood chapel, their voices echoing through the streets. He called it the Golden Note Project. Local businesses donated old guitars and ukuleles, a radio station picked up the story, and soon donations poured in, not for Miguel but for the children. Some of those kids would go on to perform on stage, others would sing in church choirs, but all of them carried the same message. Miguel had learned music was not about fame, it was about connection. One afternoon, as Miguel tuned a little boy's guitar, he looked up at the sky, blue and endless, and whispered, thank you. His mother sat nearby, still weak at times but smiling. What are you thanking for this time? She asked. He chuckled, for everything, for the struggle, the music, even the pain. Because without it, I wouldn't have found the song inside me. She placed her hand over his. Anak, that song was always there. You just needed the world to hear it. A year later, Los Angeles. Simon Cowell invited Miguel back to AGT for a reunion special. This time, Miguel didn't come alone. He brought 5 of the children from the Golden Note Project. When they walked on stage, Simon was visibly stunned. You've brought your family, he said warmly. Miguel nodded. They're my reason to keep singing. Together, they performed, Can't Help Falling in Love, with harmonies so pure that even the sound engineers backstage stood still to listen. As the final note rang out, the audience rose again, tears glistening in their eyes. Simon pressed the mic to his lips and said softly, Miguel, last time you made me cry. This time, you made me believe in humanity again. Miguel bowed and smiled. That's the power of love, Sir Simon. Epilogue. A song without end. Years later, Miguel would perform around the world, not for money, but for causes: children's hospitals, disaster relief, and charities for education. Every time he sang, Can't Help Falling in Love, he would tell the story of the people who believed in him. His mother, his neighbors, and even the man behind the golden buzzer. One day, during a charity concert in London, a reporter asked him, You've inspired millions. What's your secret? Miguel smiled, his eyes filled with the same gentle warmth that once silenced the AGT crowd. There's no secret, he said, just love. The world may forget your name, but it never forgets kindness, or a song sung from the heart. As he stepped onto the stage and began the familiar chords once again, somewhere in the audience, a man in a black t-shirt wiped a tear from his eye. It was Simon, and as Miguel sang, voice soft as light, powerful as prayer, Simon whispered to himself, the boy from Manila, still the purest voice I've ever heard. The crowd rose once more. The music swelled, and through every note, every tear, every heartbeat, Miguel's message echoed across the world. Because when you sing with love, the whole world listens.